Thank you, Representative Biggs. You know, again, and Representative Biggs just heightened, frankly, the problem, Madam Speaker, that we see in this, and it's been reiterated over and over again. This is not about a policy. This is about a person. It's about a person of the president through the other side, and especially this committee that I have served as ranking member on, now serve as a member of, have consistently went after for almost now 19 months. It has nothing to do with policies that at one point you did or did not believe in, because if this was true, we would have had a mass outcrying in 2011 when President Obama used this authority to keep out folks from human rights issues and other things. So again, the problem here is it's great to couch this in political terms. It's great to couch this in great deep policy issues, but for 18 months, this is all that we have heard. And I heard my chairman just a minute ago speak of that these policies that he disagrees with and doesn't like that are found under the law and are what we're dealing with here today under this called No Ban Act is tarnished us worldwide. I'll tell you what's tarnishing us in this country is acts like this and the constant back and forth. There are times I've wondered, and I know my friend from Arizona, we've talked about this a little bit, I've wondered why we sort of kept the house locked down for the last 5 or 6 months. But if this is what we come back to do, maybe we should just stay away, because if this is what we're doing, it's frankly frustrating, because November 3rd will be the chance to talk about this. I'm getting it's very policy and politically driven when we come to this floor on anything that really has to do with a political agenda, a date on the calendar, as I've talked about before, more than actually changing policy. Because when you look at this, I will almost guarantee you that my friends currently in the majority, if they had a president of their party in the White House, they would come back on this very quickly and be very scared of messing with this power presidentially. This is a problem that we're seeing over and over and over and over again. This No Ban Act would strip the president of his ability to use the Immigration and Nationality Act to ban travel from certain countries that present national security concerns. Ironically, as I've said earlier, this is the very power that President Trump used in January to deal with the coronavirus in China. If this was in place, he may not have had the ability to actually work on what is now we know as the pandemic early on to help stop the spread. There is consequences to political legislation. This is one of them. We saved countless lives because of that. Now they want to strip the president of the authority to do that. Now the others may say, well, we got exceptions and we got this. I'm not taking anything from this committee on exceptions for this president. There's not been any. It's simply a partisan attack. The Department of Homeland Security has identified several types of information that it needs in order to make a reliable decision regarding the admissibility of foreign countries' nationals to seek entry into the United States. Things like, does the country report lost or stolen identity documents, including passports, to Interpol? How often they do so? Does the country share information about their known or suspected terrorists or about their criminals with us? And does the country issue modern electronic passports? Why would we want to restrict the president, any president, from considering this information when determining whether to let a foreign national into our country? Instead of appreciating what has been done here by this president to ability to accomplish in regard to our national security, like addressing the crisis on our border, increasing China's increasingly hostile behavior, the Democrats have decided to move forward with this act, which we have talked about before in our committee and have pointed out many of the problems of this act. But it eviscerates the ability of any administration to take nimble and decisive action to protect our homeland when the cause for concern arises, like the threat of COVID-19. What is even more ironic, and I touched on this when I first started, Madam Speaker, is that the very power that the majority wants to strip from this president was used successfully by President Barack Obama, and also, as was pointed out by my friend from Arizona, by the Speaker of this House currently, Ronald Reagan. When we understand this actually clarifies it, actually crystallizes it. So when you see every other president have used this in some form over the years, and now it's only become a concern now because we do not like the current president, Donald Trump, and we have an election coming up very quickly, then we start seeing stuff like this. In January 2017, President Trump signed an executive order to restrict travel from certain countries that were high risk of terrorism and were public safety concern based off recommendations from the Secretary of DHS and state, along with the DNI. It is important to understand these restrictions are not permanent. This is, again, another thing that permeates even some conversation I've heard already, that we're making permanent changes. These are not permanent. They are there until the country gets it in order and actually able to answer our security concerns, which is not going to be talked about today. We're not talking about security. We're trying to make it feel like it is something else against a certain groups and ethnic groups. This is about security when you look at the law. And it says, and when those public safety concerns are removed, they were unremoved from the restricted list, such as Chad was in 2018. Let me be clear. There is no doubt that the President's use of 212F authority has helped us improve our security and the vetting of foreign nationals seeking entry into the U.S. Some countries restricted by this order have taken positive steps to come into compliance with the information sharing and public safety standards and have worked to participate in protecting international security. Is that not what we would want? Or is it being said by the majority today, we prefer lax standards for those coming here? We prefer less safety for our people of people coming here. Is that the standard being left here? I don't think the majority wants to go there, but it is seemingly implied by what is being said here, because this is actually working with countries to come into modern day compliance with known safety and international safety regulations. This bill would take authority away from the President and give it to a subordinate. Again, strange move here. Taking the presidential authority, which it goes back and shows the real intent of this bill is about this president, not about the law. It would also outrageously terminate all actions taken pursuant to any proclamation or executive order, effectively shutting down the information sharing on terrorism, criminals, and security threats that have come from these restrictions. This is dangerous, Madam Speaker, and is a bad policy. This bill is just another response, knee-jerk response by the majority because they don't like the president and they don't like the decisions he makes on behalf of the country. Unfortunately, their never-ending desire to take him down comes at the expense of American security and safety if this bill were to become law. Fortunately, we know it will not. Another day of political posturing on the floor of the House, wreaking havoc on our borders, backlogging our customs process. And here's the interesting one that nobody's talked about I've heard so far. I may have missed it, but I don't think I did. And gentlemen from Arizona, we understand something. Everything's coming here today has a price tag. This one does as well, $1 billion. But then this is really where it gets concerning, Madam Speaker, because I have tried my best over the years to work with the majority, and I see some of my friends over there that we've passed legislation with that have made an impact in this country. But here's what really bothers me. How do they pay for it? How does the majority pay for this? The majority and Democrats have decided to include this bill, a prescription drug measure that could have been bipartisan and was bipartisan if only abided by the agreed upon text negotiated by both members and both parties. Instead, we're considering an old partisan version of a prescription drug bill that will undermine critical innovation. We negotiated bipartisan changes to stop gaming and while preserving the research that benefits patients. But the Democrats and the majority have abandoned that, and with this bill, they have abandoned any hope of showing the American people they truly want to legislate instead of just constantly attacking this president. But what is deeper the concern here, especially when it comes to prescription drug costs, because I don't want to hear my friends on the majority now talk about how they want to save money and how they want to encourage innovation. When they put this into this bill, they have tore down bipartisan work that could actually save money. They got to pay for it somehow. I know they're counseling. I know they're struggling right now. We had to pay for it somehow. Well, then why not go back to the bipartisan process of working on prescription drugs instead of throwing it into this No Ban Act? The majority's moral underpinning is severely damaged when you look at the fact that they are trying to play games with the prescription drug issue in our country on this bill, when we know for a fact that bipartisanship was the way forward on this, and I had worked with and others had worked with to bring a bipartisan solution, and now we throw it out the door because we're so bent on making a political statement on this floor that bipartisanship is gone. We might as well pack it up and wait for November 3rd. That hurts this body. As the chairman of this committee in this House talked just a moment ago about tarnishing the work in the world standing by what the president has done? Are we really not going to have a conversation, Madam Speaker, about what's happening? And I know, Madam Speaker, you do as well. Concern about what happens here. Concern about actually getting something done. Concern about the very people that is lifted up by the majority and by the minority to saying we're here for the American people. But when I see pay-fors like this, when I see the pay-for happening here, I know that this is not anything but another day on the campaign trail. We're here today making a political statement. And you know who's going to suffer? The very ones. I don't want to hear it from anybody on the majority today talking about how they want to help health care, how they want to bring prescription drug costs down, how they want to get at the very issues that we're dealing with, because today you're going to go on record when you vote for this is saying we don't care about the American people's fixing of prescription drugs and getting healthy in this country. This today proves you have nothing to do. I yield back.